I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, Washington state is in an economic tailspin, so you might be surprised to learn the kinds of things that Attorney General Nick Brown wants to spend even more of your money on. Plus, do we have another Paco Debaco on our hands? I think so. And Democrats silent as the left steps up harassment of signature gatherers. That and much more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. That's undividedpod.com and click on the banner that says support the show. Hello, friends, and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Today is the kind of show I like. You'll have a ton of exclusive reporting on the show today, and we like doing that. We like mixing actual reporting and journalism with analysis that helps you cut through all the nonsense that you're going to see out there. So we're going to have a lot of that today. Plus, another Paco Debaco. Of course, you'll remember our exclusive reporting on a honest, hard-working farm worker who was ripped from his life by ICE in Washington state and breathlessly reported on by the local news media, only for us to find out he was actually a wanted murderer from Mexico that was picked up by the U.S. Marshals. Well, it seems like the media hasn't learned its lessons. We have another exclusive report in that regard. First, though, I have to start with the big news that came out yesterday, and if you're in a different blue state, this is probably going to be your reality as well, but Washington state is in an economic tailspin, and it is only going to get worse, and that's why you're seeing that. And you guys know this because you know how they work. That's why you're seeing the likes of Governor Bob Ferguson and Attorney General Nick Brown step up their public statements blaming Donald Trump for economic issues, because they know how bad what's coming is. They're going to try to tax their way out of it. And they want people blaming Orange Man bad, not the Democratic Party, which has had control of our state for much of the last 25 years. They want you to blame Trump, not them. So it's important to be very, very cognizant of that. But are people waking up to this reality? Maybe so. So the Washington State Office of Financial Management came out yesterday, and I had heard rumblings that it wasn't going to be good, their latest budget projection, and it's not. Projected state revenue through 2029 is now down by $903 million. So their projected revenue that they're bringing into the state through 2029, the projections that they had actually subtract about $1 billion. So every time they come out with a new projection, it gets worse and worse and worse. And one of the lines I found interesting in their explanation as to why says the changes in the forecast are primarily the result of a weaker taxable sales forecast for retail and construction, lower state agency revenues, and a reduction in projected real estate excise tax returns. So when I see that, none of that is a surprise to me, especially as we are on the precipice of the largest tax increase in state history for businesses. And we've had a very anti-business environment in our state for really the better part of a decade. And so businesses are leaving. And that means, of course, that your sales tax receipts are going to be down. And as far as construction, what did our friends at the builders, the Rental Housing Association of Washington, what did they warn? You pass things like rent control? You think anyone's going to want to build in this state? You think we're going to have people coming in here and building new buildings, building homes? You know, all the environmental regulations that you have put that have increased the cost of building a home by tens of thousands of dollars? Of course not. They warned it. We all saw this coming. So that's what's happening. People aren't building stuff here. They're not building apartment buildings because the policies around restricting landlords are insane, and rent control. They're not building homes. Too expensive to do that. So none of this is a surprise, and you can tie it directly back to Democratic policies. But of course, they can't blame themselves, right? And they feel like they don't have to take the blame because they have complete control over state government. So they can just gaslight and hope that they can stave off any sort of electoral consequences for it. So Bob Ferguson's statement in response to this isn't a surprise. He said, "For some time, my budget team has been preparing for a challenging revenue forecast. Today's forecast is disappointing, but not surprising. Unfortunately, we are also grappling with the impacts of President Trump's big betrayal bill, which includes billions in cuts to Washington state for programs such as Medicaid and food for hungry kids." No, it doesn't. "Approximately 28% of our budget consists of federal investment, so these cuts will have adverse impacts for many Washingtonians." He says, "As I write my first budget, I will be focused on delivering a balanced budget that maintains core services to the people of our state." And you might say, well, didn't he just write a budget? Well, you know, he came into office in late January, so technically the next time would be a budget all of his own making. But, you know, first of all, he calls it the big betrayal bill and says it cuts all this money to Medicaid. No, what it says is you have to prove that you are deserving of the benefits. Wow. So if we're getting cuts to Medicaid, that will mean that we have less people who were able or willing to prove that they needed the benefits. So I don't see what the problem is there. The other issue where he says 28% of our budget consists of federal investments, so these cuts will have adverse impacts for many Washingtonians. You know, Donald Trump has been threatening blue states with withholding federal funds for a variety of reasons, but none of those reasons are worth thrusting us into a budget crisis by just trying to stick it to Donald Trump. You know, hey, strip DEI out of government. We should do that anyway, because DEI is racist. It's backward. Hey, boys shouldn't be playing against girls. If you let them play against girls, we're going to keep money from you. Well, boys shouldn't be playing against girls anyway. Hey, you know, you can't be a sanctuary jurisdiction that thwarts the efforts of lawful immigration enforcement being conducted by our federal agents. And if you continue to do that, well, we're going to withhold funding from you. Well, we shouldn't be a sanctuary jurisdiction anyway. We can welcome immigrants who come here legally, and we can make sure that we don't stand in the way of the federal government as they're carrying out the duties that they're allowed to under federal law. So this is all about the blame game. And of course, we've talked about this a lot. Bob Ferguson has been on the road all over the place, amping up his attacks on Donald Trump as it pertains to the economy. This was just a few days ago. The Trump administration's chaotic tariff implementation is already wreaking havoc on Washington's economy and our businesses' ability to plan for the future. And of course, as you guys well know, what is wreaking far more havoc on Washington's economy and our businesses' ability to plan for the future? I don't know. The $9 to $12 billion in new taxes that is going to be on their shoulders in a matter of days? I would say that if you're saying that the impact of Trump's tariffs might be $2 billion a year for Washington's economy, but your taxes are going to be $9 to $12 billion a year, gosh, which one is wreaking more havoc on our businesses? That's very obvious. I saw this article in King 5 News that pissed me off but made me happy at the same time. Let me explain. So the headline in King 5 News, of course, is like the furthest left TV station in the Seattle market. And so, you know, I never have high expectations for their willingness to call out Democrats for policies, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the headline. New Washington state taxes surprise, confuse business owners. I read that headline and I thought, if you're surprised by the new state taxes, then you're not consuming the correct media outlets. If these taxes, the largest in our state's history, are catching you by surprise days before their implementation, then you should probably find different news outlets to consume. I would guess that they haven't done a good enough job preparing you for the eventuality of these new taxes, which should have been covered wall to wall for many months. So that was the first thing that pissed me off, is like, wow, no one should be surprised. So that's the media's fault and individual citizens for not being up on these things. It said business owners in Washington state express shock as $12 billion tax package takes effect, impacting diverse services from art classes to licenses. Sweeping new taxes and fees are hitting Washington state, and many business owners say they were completely unaware of the changes until recently. Wow, that's shocking. I would love to live in such a bubble. The change is part of a $12 billion tax and fee package. And the difference there, I say $9 billion. Some people say it's closer to $12 billion. I think are you including fees or just taxes? So The $12 billion tax and fee package signed by Governor Ferguson in May are being described as one of the largest revenue increases in state history. They affect a wide range of services from storage facilities and security staffing to marriage licenses, hunting and fishing permits, and real-time classes such as art or fitness instruction. Again, if people watched Undivided, they would know all of these things and absolutely would not be caught completely off guard by them. And then there's this story they tell in this article. And this is what kind of gives me hope. Like, okay, maybe people who haven't been paying attention are now going to start paying attention. You know, we need something to sort of put us over the edge so people start to wake up. It says the Choe family, who opened Creative Hands Art Studio in Bothell a decade ago out of their home, said they were stunned when they learned of the changes. Quote, "We did not know about this until last week. It was a big surprise." Effective October 1st, their pottery classes will now be considered live presentations and subject to a 10.2% sales tax. One of the family members said, quote, "It was like, is this real? We weren't able to accept that this is for real." They say the additional tax will be passed on to customers, and some of those customers are already leaving. And so the cycle continues. What did I say off the very top? That the Office of Financial Management attributed this $900 million reduction in their outlook, fiscal outlook, to? Well, one of the big things was a weaker taxable sales forecast and retail and construction. So what happens is we have businesses who decide to leave because you've decided to tax them to make up for a deficit. So in taxing businesses more to make up for a deficit, more businesses leave, or they have to pass those taxes along to their customers, so fewer customers buy their goods, and it just contributes to the cycle that now you have less revenue than you projected. And they're just going to repeat, rinse and repeat. So what will happen in January, now that they're down another $900 million in their projected revenue? Well, they're going to say, well, we've got to tax more, right? We got to tax more. What else are we going to do? And then what will happen? They'll tax more. It'll hit businesses. It'll hit other people, maybe real estate, and then people will leave. And that's less revenue that they have coming into their coffers. And it is going to ruin us economically. And none of it's attributable to Donald Trump. None of it is Donald Trump's fault. In 2019, Republicans in Olympia were warning Democrats to stop spending so much money on things like laser hair removal for transgender inmates, $19 million Office of Equity. They said, hey, you know, the economy's not always going to be so strong. We're going through a great period right now, but we need to save for a rainy day, and we can't keep ballooning the size of our budget because we're going to be in trouble one day. Well, one day is today. One day was actually probably a year ago when we realized how bad the budget outlook was. So they were warned about this every year for 5 years. And every year for 5 years, they said, kick rocks, we don't care. We have all these things we want to spend money on and grow the size of government. And now who's paying for those decisions? You are. I am. Businesses like this pottery class that now are categorized as a live presentation. And so they're hit with a 10.2% sales tax. How much longer do you think they'll be open? Probably not very long. So it's really not hard to figure out the cycle that the state is in with Democrats. What's tricky is to get through to the population of people who, if they hear anyone blame Donald Trump, they automatically believe it. Oh, yeah, Trump's bad, so he must be to blame for this. And that's why Bob Ferguson is doing it, because he needs a scapegoat. And he doesn't want it to be him, and he doesn't want it to be his political party, because they want to stay in power. So we need to help our friends and neighbors understand that not everything is Donald Trump's fault. Not everything can be blamed on Donald Trump. Share with them some news articles from 2019 where Democrats were being warned to stop what they were doing, or this exact scenario would happen. Now, to make matters even worse, you're only going to hear about this on Undivided today. So what happens after a budget cycle, like the one that we just went through, is then in the off-budget years, essentially, agencies can make supplemental budget requests. Like, hey, there's been a couple changes here and there, or we need more money here, so we're putting in a supplemental budget request. So that has been put out to the Office of Financial Management by the Attorney General's office. They have now put in their 2026 first supplemental budget request, okay? So in it, and when you look at it, it's just going to seem like a bunch of numbers that don't really mean anything. But when you look at it, I want to key in on some of the areas that Attorney General Nick Brown is asking to have more money dedicated to. Remember, at a time where we are in a budget hole so deep, I don't know if we'll ever dig our way out of it. So let's go through, and there's not very many. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's like 9 areas where he wants more money to the tune of, gosh, about, is that $588 million, something like that? So let's go through these areas. I don't know that it'll be a surprise to you guys. $4.7 million for what? Federal administrative litigation. So he says, hey, we need almost $5 million extra because we're suing the Trump administration so much. They write, from Inauguration Day through the end of August, Washington filed 37 lawsuits challenging federal policies to protect basic rights. Funding previously promised by the federal government, environmental policies, and coercive funding policies. The pace of litigation likely will increase as agency heads and appointees become more familiar with their positions. So what's interesting about this is I remember interviewing Bob Ferguson during the first Trump term when Bob Ferguson was Attorney General. And one of the things I'd always ask, and I asked in the interview I did, is, what would you say to taxpayers who are worried that you're spending too much money as the Attorney General's office suing Donald Trump? And the answer he would always give is, oh, these are staff attorneys. So, they're on a yearly salary. So we can, work them to the bone. It's not costing us any extra. It is costing you extra. And in this case, for the supplemental budget for the Attorney General's office, Nick Brown says they need an extra $5 million so they can increase the pace of litigation against the Trump administration. Let's keep going here, because there's actually multiple areas where he wants more money basically to fight Donald Trump. One of them is education. So he wants an additional $634,000 to defend Washington State's public education system against the racist, horrible, awful bigots in the Trump administration. It says this request is to fund the increased need for advice relating to actions and policies of the federal government. So what do you need advice for? Aren't you the Attorney General? Aren't you the top lawyer in the state, and you have a whole team of lawyers? Who are you going to for advice outside of your own office? If you need advice from someone else on legal action for the state, then why are we paying you? And of course, that $634,000 basically has to do, and it says in here, on DOJ focused on the pushing back against the federal government's gender ideology initiatives. So in essence, he wants $630,000 additional dollars, basically to aid in all the other money that they're spending to push back against the federal government for not wanting boys and girls sports. Basically. So they're going to spend millions of dollars trying to keep biological boys competing against girls. What a great use of money. It keeps going. They want an additional $400,000 to do what? Help immigrants. Of course, these are going to be illegal immigrants. And the thing that got me about this, you might say, well, $400,000 doesn't sound like a lot. And in the grand scheme of the budget, it's not a lot. But here's what they want to do with it. It says the proposal is intended to support immigrant workers in Washington by requiring employers to notify their employees of a planned Form I-9 inspection within 72 hours of receiving a notice of inspection from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So basically, this is saying that we want to help employers notify their workers that ICE is coming to do a work site inspection. And so what is this money, the $400,000? Well, they want to use it to create a sample notice for employers to use to notify employees, okay? Think about this. $400,000. So the Attorney General's office can basically come up with a one-page document that employers across the state can give to their employees to notify them that ICE is coming. It's going to cost you $400,000 to write a sample notice so employers can help employees know when ICE is coming? $400,000? I'll write one right now. It'll be a picture of Tom Homan. It'll say, Tom's a-coming. You can hand it out to all of your employees. He'll be here on this date. Wild how much it costs the government to do anything. Let's keep going here. This one pisses me off maybe more than any other thing, because to me it's the greatest attack on, I think, the citizens of Washington state that we have seen. So Attorney General Nick Brown, in the midst of a budget crisis, wants $165,000 additional dollars to help with his domestic extremism and mass violence task force, which of course is a complete farce, which is a task force that was designed to only look at right-wing extremism, to try to control and vilify your speech and speech they disagree with. We've covered it a million times. The task force spent more time in its first meeting introducing themselves with their pronouns than it did actually looking at the issue of domestic violent extremism in the state. And this is also the task force whose work is used to justify the hate crime hotline, which is used to justify and pump up numbers of alleged hate crimes with no proof that they actually meet a standard for hate crimes, so that they can continue to justify the funding of the domestic violent extremism task force. So something that is a complete farce that ignores entirely the issue that's more prominent in our state, which is left-wing domestic extremism, he wants an extra $165,000 for. Here's another one. It doesn't have to do really, well, it might in a way, the Trump administration, but it just shows the priorities here in a budget crisis. He wants an additional $1 million to help with clemency and pardons. So it says the Attorney General's office provides legal advice and staffing for the Clemency and Pardons Board. HB 1131 expands the size and work of the board to increase the number of petitions processed and hearings held. So he says, well, we need more money so we can consider more petitions for clemency and pardons from criminals serving time in our state prisons in the middle of a budget crisis. This is what his priority is: helping get more violent criminals out of prison. Now, here's the kind of kicker. And why is this happening? Why are they getting more petitions? He says, oh, the number of petitions coming into the governor's office has increased dramatically. Well, remember what the legislature did this year. They moved illegal aliens to the front of the line for pardons and commutations, because they believe, even though if you have an illegal alien who's in our state prison system, they've done something very serious. But out of their weird, twisted ideology, they decided, hey, let's move them to the front of the line, and maybe if they get a pardon and get their record wiped clean by the governor, then it'll be harder for them to be deported. So in the midst of a budget crisis, Attorney General Nick Brown wants an additional $1 million to give advice for illegal aliens currently incarcerated in our state prison system, so they can get a fast track to get a pardon or a commutation so that they don't have to leave the country. That's sick stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that put us down a path toward a massive budget deficit and $9 to $12 billion in new taxes that will make the problem even worse. Just wild. Wild. All right, coming up next, you'll remember the story of Paco, the fake immigrant whose real name was Youssef, who was actually wanted for murder out of Mexico. Well, I think we have another example of this that we're going to break down for you. It's an exclusive on Undivided. First, I hear from people all the time, Brandi, why did I wait to take the First Mark Challenge? I don't know the answer to that. We all need insurance. Why not have a company handle all your insurance for you and do so proactively every year so you never have to worry about it? First Mark Insurance will make sure that not only you have the right insurance for your needs, and that's really important, you don't want to be undercovered, but they'll also make sure you're not paying for things you don't need and that you're getting it at the right price. And they take all the stress off the table. And I think that's why I hear from so many people, you know, Brandi, I saved $1,000 a year and I don't have to handle my insurance on my own anymore. Why did I wait so long? We get comments all the time. Daryl says he's a retired law enforcement officer from Washington. My wife and I are traveling the U.S. in our fifth wheel full time. He says we reached out to First Mark Insurance. They saved us over $400 from our current insurance. He says, which I'm sure it would have gone up even more at the renewal date. I told them where I heard about them. So reach out to First Mark. Take the First Mark Challenge today. FirstMarkInsurance.com. FirstMarkInsurance.com. The very best part is they they work for you, not the insurance companies. So there is this pattern, of course, of media outlets spinning sob stories about illegal aliens. And they just take these stories at face value. If there is a sob story brought to them about, oh, the Trump administration and ICE, they did something horrible and awful, there are so many examples of the media just running with it without doing any sort of due diligence to make sure that the story is actually true. And we, did this story that went pretty viral about a guy named Paco, allegedly. The Olympian did a story. There was a GoFundMe out there, and apparently Paco was just an innocent farmer, small business owner, mechanic, who didn't do anything wrong, and ICE came and kidnapped him off the streets. And this anti-ICE activist was raising money for him. And the Olympian just did this story as if it were true. And then we find out it wasn't ICE that arrested him. It was the U.S. Marshals Service, and he's in the country illegally and was wanted for murder in Mexico. So the whole facade, broke down. And there continue to be, a ton of stories out about this nationally. Like there was this really bad example where Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal put out this story from NBC News. It said ICE agents grabbed a 5-year-old girl outside of her home and held her, screaming, to coerce her father, who's been in the U.S. for 22 years, to be detained. This is cruel, disgusting, and must end. Trump is tearing families apart. Oh my gosh, what do you mean? ICE used a 5-year-old girl and had her scream and cry to coerce her father to come out of the house? Well, no, NBC had to retract the story. Because what really happened, her dad, Edward Meha, ignored law enforcement orders and their efforts to pull him over, drove back to his house, got out of the car, gave them the double bird, darted inside his house, abandoning his 5-year-old daughter in the car. So ICE agents went in, made sure the child was safe in the car, called local police to report the abandonment of the kid, and then tried to carry out their actual immigration enforcement effort. So that's the kind of, you're talking NBC News. It's like, even on the face, does that story even sound legitimate? Hey, bring in this 5-year-old child. Scream a little bit so we can coerce your dad to come out of the house. That should raise alarm bells, but for the media, it doesn't. And, we had a good time with the Paco story because it was just this, I called it the Paco Debaco. It was this, just hunt we were all on together for the truth. And it was actually because of Undivided viewers and listeners that we ended up finding out who it actually was and sort of cracking the case. And so we can joke about how bad the media is, but this is deathly serious. And that's why we continue to share stories like the one we're going to share momentarily. Because you have these stories that talk about this cruelty and the inhumanity of ICE and the Trump administration. And what happens? We have these violent activists who go out and they dox ICE and harass ICE, and they put pictures of them on telephone poles with their home addresses on them. And yes, they try to kill ICE agents. There was just an example today in Dallas. This is a horrifying story. So there was a shooting at an ICE building in Dallas where someone who goes up from kind of a rooftop position started firing indiscriminately at the ICE building as well as into a sally port where there was a van with detainees in it. And it was actually the detainees that ended up being killed. 2 detainees killed, another one in critical condition. And on the bullets were the messages that said anti-ICE. Right? Is that what it said? Anti-ICE. On the bullets, according to DHS, and they released pictures of it. So here you have someone, this guy was found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, has been identified as Joshua John. All this rhetoric happening in the country. He decides to just fire indiscriminately into an ICE building. Ends up, with bullets that say anti-ICE on them. Sounds like also a nod to what happened in the Charlie Kirk case. Like maybe it inspired another psycho. Ends up killing 2 detainees, critically injuring a 3rd. So this stuff is serious. And when media outlets fail to do their job and fail to live up to their obligations to get to the truth, they directly contribute to things like that. The media absolutely has blood on its hands from this instance and other incidents because they refuse to do just the basics of their job. So this is another example that I think is going to send all of us on a wild search, and we are already conducting this search for the truth of this story. So this story comes from KIMA in Yakima, Washington. The headline, ICE arrests in Yakima increase, families raise concern. Okay, pretty standard. And look, is this the biggest news outlet in the world? No, it's a news station, TV station in Yakima. The thing is, though, of course, that Yakima has a pretty big percentage of Hispanic people living there. And we have a lot of farm workers there and laborers, etc. And so keep in mind that that's the audience who's being shoveled this. So let's get into it. So there's a woman in here who basically is the subject of the story, and she's talking and telling this tale about what happened to her husband. It says, the Yakima Valley has seen an increase in arrests made by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Jamie Ortiz says that her husband was arrested on September 8th while he was on his way to work. She says, quote, he left for work at about 5:55, and within about 5 minutes, he called me. He said, Jamie, there's a big white truck behind me, and they're flashing their lights. It's not the police. And I told him that I was on my way. Ortiz says that she arrived at the scene roughly 4 minutes later and her husband was gone. The only thing left behind was his car. Okay. So, telling this whole story as a wife. Oh my gosh, he left for work. He called me. There's a white truck behind me. It's lights flashing. It's not the police. She's very specific. 4 minutes later, I got there and he was nowhere to be found. So all of this happened very soon. She goes on in the story, I went to the ICE office and I brought in his papers and his work permit. I said, you need to let him go. He's protected. And their words to me were, quote, I don't care that your husband has a prima facie. We do what we want. But they said it in bad words. So she's saying that the ICE agents told her, we don't care that your husband's protected. We do what we want. And then she claims they also inserted some bad words in there. Okay, some swear words. So if I'm reading that, does that sound true to you? No, but I'll keep reading because surely they're going to try to confirm some of this. She goes on to say, to the HSI agent that met me at the door, you have no soul. My world was shattered and you laughed at me. So she's saying that an ICE agent laughed in her face while she's saying that she, expressing concern for her husband. Ortiz says that even for those whose family members are undocumented and are arrested by the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network is available to keep families in contact. She said, it's hard what's going on. I'm going through it too. I just want everyone to know that there is help available. Okay, so you're following us so far. She tells this story to Kima, says, oh my gosh, these ICE agents were horrible to her. Swore at her, laughed in her face as her world was shattered. And then she says she's speaking out because she wants other immigrants to know about the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, which is like a far left group trying to protect our state's sanctuary policies and, is perfectly fine with people being here illegally. She's like, I want people to know what's going on. So that was an interesting pivot in the story, right? Nicole searched this woman's name and she found a February 2025 article from the Seattle Times where this same woman is speaking to the Seattle Times about, and really from the position of an anti-ICE activist. She said we're talking about a video that had spread quickly on the internet out of the Yakima Valley. And part of the reason is because at the time they were posted on a Facebook page called ICE Border Patrol Sightings Yakima Valley that resident Jamie Ortiz started January 22nd to help her neighbors stay informed. She said, Sunday morning we had 300 members. By that night we had 11,000, said Ortiz, who lives east of Yakima. So here she is in a February 2025 article talking about this Facebook page she started called ICE Border Patrol Sightings Yakima Valley. Now, that could just be a coincidence, right? That you have this anti-ICE activist who, is quoted in a Seattle Times article, has a connection clearly to the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, and then, oh my God, now they've taken her own husband. Now it's really hit home. Now it's happening to her. So there was and Nicole, really quick, I want to go back to this second, talking about her message to ICE agents. When she says, I went to the ICE office, here it is. I didn't read this part earlier. I want to revisit it. I went to the ICE office. I brought his papers and his work permit. I said, you need to let him go. He's protected. And their words to me were, I don't care. We do what we want. They told me, we're sending him to the Yakima jail. He's going away for a long time, lady. The article goes on to say charges were not filed and her husband was soon released. However, Ortiz says that after her husband's release from the Yakima County Jail, he was immediately arrested again as he walked out. Now let's put our thinking caps on with this. Let's leave this up for a second. So she says that he's arrested by ICE. And the ICE agents tell her he's going away for a long time. And he gets booked into the Yakima County Jail. Well, based on state law, that actually is not possible. If he's arrested by immigration agents for an immigration offense, state law says, because of our sanctuary policies, that local entities can't assist in immigration enforcement in any sort of way. So our county jails cannot be used as immigration detention facilities. Unless, of course, it wasn't ICE who arrested him at all, and he was actually arrested for some sort of crime, and it wasn't even ICE agents, then he could go to the Yakima County Jail, or unless, of course, none of this happened at all. So she says that they told her, we're sending him to the Yakima Jail. He's going away for a long time, lady. Which, of course, doesn't sound true at all. But then she goes on to tell them charges weren't filed, and her husband was soon released. Okay, so they just told you he's going away for a long time. But then he was just released. But then, after that, he was immediately arrested again as he was walking out. Does any of that make any sense to you? And if it's an immigration case, they don't file charges. You get an order of deportation. So nothing in the story that she's telling makes a bit of sense. ICE agents aren't going to bring him to the local county jail. They can't. Prosecutors aren't going to charge him. It's an ICE issue. They told you they were going to send him away for a long time. He's going away for a long time. If it's an ICE case, what is he going away for a long time for? Going away to Mexico for a long time? She makes it sound like they're telling her we're going to put him in prison for a long time. Well, they can't do that for an ICE case. They just deport him, right? So none of it makes sense. But for whatever reason, in this entire Kima story, they don't have any other source. There's nothing that says we reached out to ICE for confirmation. There's nothing that says we reached out to the Yakima County Jail for confirmation. It just takes this woman's bizarre, unbelievable story that makes no sense and prints it as fact. There's one more key detail missing from the story. Her husband's name. Nowhere in the story does it say her husband's name, first or last name, which would be one of the most easy ways to verify whether her story was true. I could very easily find out with that name, was there someone by that name booked into the Yakima County Jail on this date? What was he booked for? Who booked him in? And we could start to try to piece together his story. We could take that name. We could reach out to our contacts at ICE. We could reach out to our contacts at DHS. Did you pick this guy up at this exact time, in this exact place, on this exact date? And they'd be able to tell us in a second. But there is no name. Gee, why would someone make up a story like this? Well, after she pushes out this story all over, social media and gets this headline in Kima and tells this sad story about the horror that happened to her husband, what does she do? Come on, guys, what does she do? She creates a GoFundMe, which now has roughly $7,000. It says, stand with Jamie Ortiz, fight for her family's future. It's pictures of her and what she, I guess, is her husband and what he looks like. And then it has a news article that talks about the work he's done as a cherry picker. Migrant Latino cherry pickers work flathead orchards through smoke and heat. And this, under that picture, does have a name. First place we've seen a name that she's associating with her husband. Luis Ortiz shows a full bucket of cherries at an orchard near Flathead Lake. It usually takes him 10 minutes to hand pick an entire bucket. So, okay, now we have a name and we're going to go out and we're working our sources to try to figure out is this Luis Ortiz someone who was arrested in the former fashion that Kimmel says? Also interesting that on Jamie Ortiz's Facebook page, where she's raising money for her husband, she calls herself a digital creator. So she's like a social media influencer, a content creator. And she has a picture of her husband, says he was unjustly detained, has this whole story about going to visit her husband, having to pack everything he owns, 25 years of their life, into a tiny suitcase. And she has a picture of a suitcase with a Department of Homeland Security office logo behind it. We try to do kind of a reverse image search, trying to figure out where does that come from. Now, much like with the Paco story, I am open to being wrong. I am open to a possibility that this Jamie Ortiz woman, who, you know, has been in the news before as an anti-immigrant, anti-ICE activist, that it happened to her and came home and her husband, a cherry picker, just got ripped off the streets, even though he has legal work documents to be able to be here. And I guess ICE agents told her we're going to put him away for a long time and made her cry. I'm open to all of it being true. But that wouldn't change the fact that this news organization did no work whatsoever to verify a story that sounds fake, that has details in it that aren't possibly true, like ICE booking him into the Yakima County Jail on some sort of immigration detainer or offense. So this is another example, and I think what we're going to see, here's the work that we're doing on this. So now that we found his little name, you know, we're doing some work to try to reach out to our sources with DHS and ICE and see, can we identify someone by that name who was arrested at that location? So we got that just before the show today. We've reached out to her directly because on her Facebook, you'll see, if you can go back to her Facebook, Nicole, in this whole sob story she posts, she lists 4 things under it. Her GoFundMe, her Cash App, her Venmo, and her Zelle. Well, in order to list her Zelle, she has to have a phone number. And so we have reached out to the phone number connected with her Zelle to ask her, is Luis your husband's name? Can you provide any other information that will help us verify your story? Nicole, no response quite yet?
No response yet.
Shocking. So the other thing we did, of course, is we reached out to Kimmel, to their news director. And we said, look, you know, we've done a lot of stories where something that sounded fishy turned out not to be true as it pertains to ICE enforcement. Sent him the link to the story, and we said we have a few questions. Did Kimmel verify the story told by this woman with ICE, Yakima County, or any other entity? Does Kimmel know, or did Kimmel ask for the name of her husband to confirm her account? Because so far she hadn't been willing to provide it. There were people on social media commenting, what is your husband's name? What is your husband's name? And she wasn't telling them. The story asserts that ICE arrests have increased in the Yakima Valley, but no data is provided. So I asked, does Kimmel have data to back up that claim in the headline? Because they just make this broad claim, ICE arrests have skyrocketed, you know, in the Yakima Valley, but they don't provide any information or a time frame. And then we said, the woman makes some pretty intense claims about what she says ICE agents said to her and how they treated her family. Did Kimmel reach out to ICE to get their side of the story? Because if Kimmel did any of that basic work, it's not reflected in the news story. And I do understand that this isn't the largest news agency in the world, but this story is indicative of what we've seen so many times from the legacy media. That if there's a narrative that makes Donald Trump look bad, they are willing to go with it and throw basic journalistic standards completely out the window, as was the case in the Paco story. And you have so many red flags that they're willing to ignore to push a narrative. All while ICE agents are being attacked, vilified, murdered, while people are shooting into ICE offices in Dallas. These sort of stories contribute to that animus. And so it's important that we continue to hold the media accountable for not doing basic research as part of their reporting and contributing to a toxic environment that's putting the lives of ICE agents and anyone really in their orbit in danger. So we'll launch this off just like we did with the Paco story to try to get to the bottom of exactly what happened here. My gut tells me this, and I think my gut was right on the Paco story, right? Because I didn't say it was made up. I said that's probably not his name and not what he was arrested for. I said there's probably someone who was arrested, but it's not this story. I think that's probably the case. My gut tells me here that this guy was arrested for something other than an immigration issue. And as part of that, maybe immigration got involved. That's what my gut tells me, because why else would he go to a county jail? So we're going to find out. We're going to find out. We might have another Paco Debaco on our hands. We'll keep you updated. Probably have an update tomorrow. All right, in our segment, Unbelievable, threats and harassment continue against signature gatherers, and the Democratic Party is saying nothing. Before we get there, make sure you join me, my friend Jonathan Choe, and our friends at the Rental Housing Association for the Engage Conference. It's coming up October 22nd and 23rd. Lord knows we'll have a lot to talk about as it pertains to housing policy in the state of Washington and beyond, really. So we're going to talk about all facets of it, what's happening with rent control, what that's doing to the housing market, home prices. We're also going to be talking about housing as it pertains to the homeless industrial complex, etc. So go to rhawa.org, rhawa.org, where you can not only sign up for Engage, but if you're a landlord, sign up to become a member of RHA, rhawa.org. So we broke the news yesterday that the two latest Let's Go Washington initiatives are attracting the same kind of left-wing vitriol that the Let's Go Washington initiatives did in 2023. So there's been, harassment of lawful signature gatherers. We told some stories about, signature gatherers being blocked with cards, having their pages stolen or scribbled out, and all of these things going on. Well, it's only getting worse. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. All right, so this video got sent to me after the show yesterday, and we exposed some of what's been happening to signature gatherers collecting signatures for two initiatives. One is to restore parental rights. The other is to protect girls' sports. Common sense. Parents have a right to know what's happening to their kids at school. We already passed it once. Let's pass it again. And no biological boys shouldn't be competing against girls. So there's those two initiatives. You'll see them out in the community now. If you're looking for a place to sign them, go to letsgowa.com, letsgowa.com. But if you're going out into the community to sign them, you might be met by an unhinged lunatic who thinks you're a bigot transphobe. So this video takes us to Bonnie Lake, to a Walmart. What's with Bonnie Lake lately? Are all the unhinged people moving to Bonnie Lake? I feel like we've had multiple stories in this regard. So the story that is given to us, and there's a video really to back it up, is you've got a woman who's collecting signatures at the Walmart there, is confronted by an individual who is so mad they're shaking. You'll see it physically in the video. And this is how it goes.
Let me tell you what that's really about. If you don't know, you inbred hillbilly bullshit. You know what that's really about? Boys like Marcus, who the only place he was accepted was at school. He found a little acceptance from his teachers. At home, he couldn't take another beating. But don't worry about it, because he killed himself at 19. He couldn't take another beating from the very people who were supposed to love and protect him. And there isn't a day goes by I don't think about that child. No relation to me, but I'm a priest, and that story was brought to me.
Okay, can we stop there for a second before we continue? So much to unpack there. I will say I don't know if that's a man or a woman. And I think that's important for me to point out. What, do you think is it that obvious to you? I'm not trying to be mean. But if it's a transgender person, that might make, that's a part of the story, since basically they're saying this is about transphobia, right? But between the voice and all that stuff, you laugh.
I just had.
Are you sure?
I guess you're right. I had assumed it was maybe a smoker, but
so I'm just not sure. I don't know either way. But is angry about the parental rights initiative, saying there's this kid named Marcus who was being beat at home, found a loving environment at school, and then killed themselves. So I don't know if that story is true. I don't know if there is a person named Marcus who was trans, who was being beaten at home, but found a loving environment. But the story ends with him killing himself. So it's kind of, I don't mean to laugh. I'm pretty sure it's probably not true, but if it is, that's sad. But your argument is that kids should have these safe spaces at school to hide from their hateful parents, and that Marcus had one, but Marcus still killed himself? So the safe space at school really didn't help Marcus at all, did it? And also you're saying Marcus was beaten at home, which would be horrible if true, but there's laws against that have nothing to do with parental rights and education. If you're beating your child, that's against the law. That's what CPS is for. So far, this person is making absolutely no sense. And what did they say at the beginning? Hillbilly backyard, inbred hillbilly. Got it. So that's what they think of you. From a priest, allegedly. That's what they think of you. If you want to protect girls' sports or you want rights as a parent, you're an inbred hillbilly. Got it. Let's continue.
And people like you who spew hatred against others.
This does protect
No,
kids.
that's what it's about.
It does protect
It's
it.
because teachers and schools accept the child's pronouns as they are. That's what you're doing, is spreading hatred against children. How dare you in all of your magnificent white glory? You certainly know what it is to be oppressed and marginalized. Who would know better than you?
You're white. I didn't know if they knew. You are also white, but thanks for standing up. Let's keep going.
Can you imagine what it must be like to be the parent of a child who happens to be transgender and have to send them out in the world every day with people like you? I am so angry, I'm shaking.
So what's interesting there is I'll just go with she's talking, don't laugh up there. I don't know, I'm not trying to be mean. She's talking about, caring about the parents of a trans child. That's literally what we're talking about with the initiative. That if there's a child who thinks they're trans, making sure the parents can help them through this moment in their lives. So you clearly have care for parents. Can you imagine what that's like as a parent? No, that's why I don't want to make decisions for another person, for a parent, decisions involving their child. So she doesn't even realize that this rant she's going on makes absolutely no sense. Let's continue. Yes, there's more. Look at the shaking. Look at the shaking.
What? How is it your business what somebody has in their pants? What genitalia they were born with and who and what they choose to do with it? How is that your business? Are
it's
you a
not.
Pervert?
It's the parents.
You're harassing me.
Do you want no?
You really are. You really are harassing me.
Please explain to me what makes it your business.
I mean, could you step away from my table? Like, I feel like you're harassing me.
I will stay as long as you do today. If you have made it your mission to spew hatred towards children, then I have just as much right to explain to people that what we need in this society is acceptance and tolerance and unity and compassion. Oh, please do come. Don't miss your chance to be a bigot. Now, if you're more comfortable, I'll go stand over there.
Yeah, that would make me a lot more comfortable.
I will move away from you.
That's what we were trying to stop in 2023. That kind of behavior that clearly interferes with the ability of people to exercise their right to sign an initiative. You think anybody is walking up to that table to sign an initiative with that person standing there shaking, calling them a bigot? You see the person who's said something about signing and turns around and calls them a bigot. Please do. I mean, that's threatening. That's absolutely harassment. And it should be something that both sides realize, hey, we wouldn't allow that behavior at a ballot drop box. You wouldn't allow that burly woman to be outside a ballot drop box shouting and shaking at people, preventing them from putting their ballot in. It would be against the law. But if it's conservatives with an initiative, Democrats don't want to protect them. I mean, I would have felt in danger. That person collecting signatures was very calm. Please step back. Was smart to record the situation so they had proof. Please step back, give me some space. And yes, if you're going to verbalize, she said at the end, well, people have a right to know that we need to be about inclusion. Yeah, they do. So combat the initiatives with your ideas. Combat the initiatives by explaining to people your point of view, that boys should be allowed to play against girls, that we should keep secrets from parents. But to harass and intimidate signature gatherers, this has all gone too far. And you should see Reddit right now. The Reddit, especially in the Olympia area, is scary. I mean, this particular Reddit thread is the same Reddit thread that they were organizing protests against me to call me a transphobe. It's the same Reddit thread that's just this far left, crazy, radical gender ideology pushing all this stuff, hates cops, etc. So there are a ton of posts. Anti-trans petition being pushed on people outside the Walmart, anti-trans petitioners outside Safeway off of Harrison. So, telling people anti-trans individuals can be found here. What do you think crazy people are going to do with that information? This user says, this is what I'm saying. We need to be meaner to these people. There is no depth they won't go to unless they're shamed out of society. Let them know you want them gone. There's no civility to be had with fascists. A lot of people are suggesting that users accidentally spill something all over the petitions. This one says, yell at them. That's what I did today. Make them uncomfortable. I mean, that is wild. Is it fine to just air horn these people right in the face until they leave? Well, according to Democrats, it is. And I've been tagging the Washington State Democratic Party, Secretary of State Steve Hobbs. Do I expect them to do anything? No. But we're only a couple weeks into this. And I genuinely, as I said on the show yesterday, I'm concerned for the safety of signature gatherers on these issues. Because the far left, radical, gender-obsessed mob is dangerous and they're violent. And the Washington State Democratic Party, all these things about this being anti-trans and some of what that woman was shaking and expressing to the woman at the Walmart, these are lines directly from the Democratic Party. They put out a fundraising email about these two new initiatives. And here's how they characterize them. To all their Democratic minions, protecting fairness in girls' sports. They call it a deceptive proposal that would ban transgender girls from playing on teams that match their gender identity, forcing students to undergo invasive physicals to prove their sex. They want to paint it as a disgusting thing, which, of course, you already have to take a physical to participate in high school athletics in the state of Washington. And there is a document associated with the WIAA where at the top of it, you have to mark what your gender of birth is and what your current gender identity is. So this is, and you know who does that? You know who does a physical? A doctor. So nothing would change. Basically, a doctor would attest to, yes, this is a male, yes, this is a female. Here's how they characterize the Parents' Bill of Rights, a measure designed to give far-right activists more power to censor classrooms, undermine local control, and silence teachers. So you have the Washington State Democratic Party putting out hateful misinformation about these initiatives to their minions. Their minions are going out there spreading that disinformation and their hate on Reddit and other social media pages. And that's why you have signature gatherers at risk. That's why you have people destroying signatures, stealing signatures, harassing, yelling, intimidating, threatening signature gatherers, because they have total and complete cover from the Democratic Party to continue to do it. Wild. Be careful out there. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about Jimmy Kimmel's return to the airwaves and what Governor Bob Ferguson in Washington State had to say about it. Yes, he's focused on only the most important things. First, if you think that your roof is reaching its final stages of life, so to speak, reach out to our friends at Valentine Roofing. You can call for a free estimate, 206 Roofing, 206 Roofing. Valentine, one of our newest sponsors, our newest sponsor on the Undivided podcast. Here's the best part about it. If you think, hey, my roof is on its last legs, don't wait until the heavy rain hits, because they'll come for free and they'll just do an assessment for you. And they're not going to try to push you into buying a new roof. They'll say, hey, we can actually repair it and you don't have to buy a new roof right now. So they can do that. They also can do a leak stoppage for you, just so they can make sure if there is a problem with your roof, it does need to be replaced. There's no further damage. And they even offer zero down financing for most projects. So you can get the work done now, pay over time, which is really helpful. And by the way, Valentine does more than just roofing. If you need new siding, gutters, attic insulation, exterior cleaning, you can expect the same great service from our friends at Valentine Roofing. In fact, we got a message from Suzanne Monson, Dory Monson's widow today, and she said, hey, I saw Valentine partnered with you because they were longtime sponsors of Dory's show. She said, make sure you remind people that they do other things too. They clean my third floor windows, which is nice. So that's very helpful. I need to get the outside of my windows clean, so I've got to call Valentine to do that. So schedule a free estimate by calling 206 Roofing. Again, call 206 Roofing. Please tell them you heard about them on Undivided. All right, in national news. So Jimmy Kimmel back in the airwaves. Really weird. I didn't know fascists changed their mind in a matter of days. I thought the fascist Trump regime had taken him off the air, and it's weird that he was back on the air. It's very strange. But here's his explanation for his remarks that got him kicked off the air, where he said that the right was trying to paint the murderer of Charlie Kirk as anyone other than one of them, a MAGA extremist.
I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is, you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. Nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. That was really the opposite of the point I was trying to make. But I understand that to some that felt either ill-timed or unclear, or maybe both. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset. If the situation was reversed, there's a good chance I'd have felt the same way. I have many friends and family members on the other side who I love and remain close to, even though we don't agree on politics at all. I don't think the murderer who shot Charlie Kirk represents anyone. This was a sick person who believed violence was a solution, and it isn't. Ever. And also, selfishly, I am a person who gets a lot of threats. I get many ugly and scary threats against my life, my wife, my kids, my coworkers because of what I choose to say. And I know those threats don't come from the kind of people on the right who I know and love. So that's what I wanted to say on that subject. But I don't want to make this about me because, and I know this is what people say when they make things about them, but I really don't. This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this.
Yeah, and the country does allow you to have a show like that. I think it's clear. That's why you're back on the airwaves today. So I think that threw cold water on the FCC thing. Not that the FCC didn't overstep its bounds in certain things it said verbally. But, you know, this whole, this is what always bothers me with these apologies that are always couched in something. I didn't mean to suggest that one particular group was side was responsible for this. You actually literally did. That's literally what you did in this way of saying, so if you felt that way, I'm sorry. No, you said they're trying to act as if he's anything other than one of them, you know, a MAGA type. So, which was obviously verifiably false at the time. And so it's not an acceptable retraction, I guess. You know, I would have accepted, I said this, that wasn't true. The FBI, they say, and even his family says, he was indoctrinated in far left ideology. I blamed it on the right. I was wrong. I would have accepted that, but that's not what he did, right? It's not what he did. I'm very curious to see where the ratings are at, especially after a couple weeks. Governor Bob Ferguson, as we're dealing with a massive budget deficit, he was posting about this, saying Sinclair is asking Jimmy Kimmel for an apology. They have it backward. They owe him an apology. Okay. That makes no sense. And then he shared an article about Como not airing the return of Jimmy Kimmel's show in Seattle.
Right. Made sure to share it on all of his socials.
Yep. Oh, Como's not going to do it. And I called it yesterday. Mm-hmm. There were protesters outside Como. Mm-hmm. There were protesters outside. It was more the geriatric type. But, you know, it's like he wanted people to be mad at Como, even though Como's owned by Sinclair. So it's not really their choice one way or the other. But why in the world would Sinclair owe him an apology? That makes no sense. But thank you for that, Bob Ferguson.
Como actually tried covering it last night. It was awkward coverage of it.
I mean, they have to, right? Because you can't just ignore it.
Well, I mean, coverage of them not airing. It was awkward. The screen kept moving in and out.
Super weird. So I was wrong about one thing yesterday. I thought for some reason Gavin Newsom was going to be Jimmy Kimmel's guest on his first date back, but I don't know how I got it confused. But Newsom was on Colbert, but was equally unlikable on Colbert. Here's a clip.
I fear that we will not have an election in 2028. God. I really mean that. In the core of my soul, unless we wake up to the code red, what's happening in this country, and we wake up soberly to how serious this moment is.
Yeah, we might not have a California in 2028 if you don't do a better job at being governor. It's just crazy. So fear-mongering, he wants to be governor so bad. So you're going to be seeing a lot of him all over the airwaves, because that, I think, is who Democrats are moving towards, which I would love, by the way. I think Gavin Newsom will lose in a landslide to really anyone on the Republican side, because everyone knows generally in the rest of the country that California is extreme. Certainly for Democrats in places in the Midwest. They are not California Democrats. So please try to run another California Democrat. It'll turn out the same way the last one did. Okay, is this Antifa's FAFO moment? Possibly. So, of course, President Trump came out. He designated Antifa a terror organization, but they decided they're going to come out in full force anyway. They've been occupying the ICE building in Portland for several months now. And yesterday, they went down to Eugene, Oregon. Here's some video from our friend Katie Davis-Court. She says the now domestic terror group is posted up at the entrances, exits to the federal building in Eugene, Oregon. They're pounding on doors and windows. Sources inside say employees are having to find alternative exits. So you've got some Antifa, and there were flyers saying, oh, solidarity with what's happening in Eugene, which nothing's happening. They just want to protest outside the federal building in Eugene. So they kind of surrounded it. We're patrolling the perimeter. We're banging on glass, the same old Antifa types, all in black, harassing Katie, trying to block journalists from filming their illegal actions because they're terrorists, and that's what they do. And so I saw that video from Katie, and I was on social media, and I said, time to use that new executive order, Trump administration. It's like, now's your chance to be able to actually do something about Antifa and show us what it is going to look like when Antifa is a terror group. So it did not take long for federal agents to come out and do their thing. Shame! Shame! A couple of the scenes there from Katie. The Assistant Attorney General of the United States, Harmeet Dillon, shared it, said, you love to see it. I do love to see it. So the question is, of course, of those arrested, how does it look different? So, 2 days ago, they weren't a terror group. Now they're a terror group. So in essence, you've arrested them. How do you prove? Can they prove these individuals some sort of tie to Antifa? So I think this is a test, and really the first one I've seen. What happened in Eugene yesterday? Can you prove they're Antifa? And is there some other element now of criminal prosecution for them moving forward? So we will wait and see. But if you're not following Katie Davis-Court on X, no one is covering the Antifa situation in Portland and in Eugene and other areas of Oregon as well as she is. So we appreciate her continuing to put herself in danger. It was funny, though, last night she sought refuge in a bar across the street, which isn't funny. That's scary. But the bar patrons in Eugene were yelling at Antifa, like telling them to go back to Portland. I saw. So the bar patrons gave her refuge in the bar, which I was like, that's so great. Not everywhere in Oregon is insane. All right, we'll get to comments, our subscriber show poll coming up next. First, don't forget to sign up for Zach Abraham's Back to Basics webinar. It's happening October 2nd, 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. And this is just a really good way, I think to do a couple things. If you're concerned about your retirement portfolio, given what's happening, trade deals, uncertainty of AI, where the markets are at, this is just a good kind of time to gauge how much risk your retirement portfolio might be exposed to. And then Zach is going to explain, have a frank discussion on the basic fundamentals of value investing, give you a perspective on the outlook for the remainder of 2025, and do a full reveal of how Bulwark is always looking for opportunities to lower risk, lower cost, and give your retirement as much upside as possible. So I think attending the webinars is just a good sort of introduction to Bulwark and to Zach and their approach to your retirement portfolio and trying to make sure it's not exposed to too much risk. So hear directly from Zach as he shares his insights in this free Back to Basics webinar. Again, October 2nd, 3:30 p.m. Pacific, totally free to sign up. Go to knowyourriskpodcast.com, knowyourriskpodcast.com. All right, let's get to our daily subscriber show poll, which we put out on Patreon, Locals, and X. I asked you guys, given what's happening with the signature gatherers, and we've also been in the midst of a ton of conversations around free speech, should you be free to shout at signature gatherers? Is that free speech? Should you be free to walk up to a signature gatherer and give them the old piece of your mind? Nicole, yay or nay?
Yay. I mean, unfortunately, that's part of it. I do think that the businesses could say, like, they could make a decision to escort them off because it's their business. So you could say we don't allow shouting and escort them off. But I mean, I don't think you could, arrest somebody for yelling at a signature gather. I don't know how you're supposed to enforce no yelling.
Yeah, unless it is into threats or harassment.
Threats or harassment, different story, but just yelling.
Here's my issue with this. I understand the free speech element of it, but state law doesn't treat different aspects of democracy the same when it comes to the protections. You can't stand 25 feet from a ballot drop box and shout in a way that's audible to people who are dropping off ballots. And I think it extends from a polling location or a election location and a ballot drop box 100 feet if you have some sort of amplification device. So we have these things built into to avoid voter intimidation, right? We all agree voter intimidation should be a crime, and it is a crime. I see this not as free speech, but as voter intimidation. And I don't know who makes that judgment in the moment. I mean, if you have somebody who comes up and they want to ask about the initiative and just share, oh, okay, I don't agree with it and here's why, and they do it in a calm way, and they're not intimidating other voters. To me, that's the act. Because if you're doing something that's stopping other voters from being able to participate in the democracy, like this woman who's shouting, you're a bigot, all this stuff, well, that's voter intimidation. So to me, the answer is nuanced, but I think it has to be no if you're going to be consistent with other aspects of the democratic process. Most subscribers agree 60% to 40%. 60% say no, you shouldn't be able to just shout at signature gatherers. There's got to be some limitations on it. Sabrina says, speak your piece respectfully. Yes, but shouting, the way that woman was, it should be considered harassment. It was obvious the death was a person she must have cared about. If not, then she was just looking for a reason to get spun up. Sarah said, I answered no, but only because I feel like the shouting always escalates to physical threats. I think it's okay for the opposition to demonstrate, just as our side has done before. But if they're in the faces of signature gatherers, bullying and intimidating them, they should not have the right to do that. They've crossed a line. How would they feel if the tables were turned? We all know. Yeah, and that's the thing is when does it cross the line into intimidation and harassment? And therefore voter intimidation. And how can we legislate that in a way that doesn't suppress free speech? Because they are welcome. That's why I just think a buffer zone is the easiest way. Like you can have a 25-foot buffer zone, just like you do around the ballot drop box. And that person can go 25 feet away and they can post a table with their big signs and encourage people not to sign the initiatives. Because or else you're just asking for confrontations like this. And it is voter intimidation. Teresa says, no, you can't shout. Is there not any common courtesy anymore? No, there's definitely not any common courtesy. And a lot of you are saying, well, it sounds like it's harassment. So maybe there's instances where it does cross a line into something criminal that the police should be able to deal with.
I mean, if you're possibly damaging somebody's hearing with a bullhorn, like that would be obviously something you could or that you could be able to call the cops on.
Well, no, apparently not in Portland, because they were doing that in Portland for 3 months and cops didn't do anything about it. Yeah, they said, yes, you should be able to shout, but no threats or touching. That's from Eloise. So it sounds like people are pretty split on it. And I do understand it's a difficult thing to legislate, but we don't say that when it comes to ballot drop boxes. I don't hear anyone advocating for candidates to be able to stand right at a ballot drop box and try to convince people right before they put their ballot in that they should vote for them, and try to coerce them. Or in cases where it's, oh, don't vote for so-and-so. I don't hear anyone making that argument for ballot drop boxes. So I'm not sure why it's such a robust free speech debate around another voting location, because that's what you're doing with your signature. You are voting. A couple over on locals, Robin Black says, I voted no because they get so out of control. Everyone certainly has a right to free speech, but not when you get into personal space or obstruct others from conversing. People need to find their manners. I agree. Dan said, it's not a free speech thing, it's a harassment thing. Matthew says, if it doesn't interfere with signature gathering, including intimidation of those who want to sign, then yes, I do believe you should be able to shout. Good comments per the usual. All right, some comments from the live stream. We missed one yesterday, super chat I wanted to get in. I'm just a ray of sunshine. $19.99 because I love the show. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, it's Matt Gilbert's birthday today?
It is.
Do I have to sing happy birthday to him if I sang it last year?
I mean, Matt's pretty good to us, so maybe you could do something different. I don't know.
Happiest of birthdays to you. Happiest of birthdays to you. Matt Gilbert. I don't know. was my, okay, you know, I'm sorry for that. I ruined your birthday. On the budget outlook worsening, old sub sailor Comrade Ferguson doing his best to break the good, hardworking citizens of this state and drive them out. He's working to eliminate all resistance to rule. Yeah, 100%. Moon Goddess says, Turd Ferguson thinks we're completely stupid. He's hoping you're completely stupid. You got to prove him otherwise. Milkman, tax us to death, then tax us for death. Yeah, that's another one of the taxes that increased. Literally the cost of dying in the state of Washington. Robert, 12.5% more state employees since 2021. Anybody feel better served as a result? Not me. Not me either. On Attorney General Nick Brown's insane priorities, Fran, when is Nick Brown going to start working for Washington State and leave Washington, D.C. alone? Never. Nope. Because doing what he's doing now got Bob Ferguson to the governor's office, and he wants to be governor someday, so he's just going to do exactly what worked for Bob. And I guess that's smart. A mother's words. They are hoping everyone who's committed to Washington will flee. If someone is trying to steal your home, get angry. I am angry. The Dallas shooting on the ICE building. Glitched there for a second. Joni Roy says, the media is terrorizing people who watch. NBC, ABC, and CBS is the worst. On the ICE arrest in Yakima, alleged ICE arrest, I'm very curious what you guys think. Gregory Larson says, at first they made it sound like he was kidnapped, so why didn't she go to the police instead of straight to the feds? Half-orc fighter, if people are going to pull this, at least take a creative writing class and learn to do some basic research. Yeah, the story does not sound legitimate. Pat, per usual, media sells a tale, no responsibility for the truth. On threats and harassment against signature gatherers, Bill Biz, $20 super chat. Thank you, Bill. We have certain strict procedures regarding the voting process. It should follow that there should be reasonable protections for the initiative process and signature gatherers. Yeah, I have to agree with that. Prince Elien, it's my business if and when your son wants, it is my business if and when your son wants to play sports against or undress around my daughter. Yeah, it is people's business. I mean, the whole point is like, leave the radical gender ideology out of things.
A lot of the Reddit comments and just a lot of the pushback is, why does it matter? Why are you concerned about who has what in their pants and whatever? I'm like, no, it does matter because of those people being in the same locker rooms as your daughters who like it's just bizarre to me how people can reason these things without listening to the other side, without even considering the girls, without considering anything. Like, it's just wild.
And if you've missed it, we did 2 great interviews, one with a female athlete, one with the biological boy who played against her. 2 in-depth interviews. It was a great, respectful conversation. I think everyone learned a lot. And I do believe the trans athlete walked away understanding better why the female athlete was so upset. On Jimmy Kimmel's return to air, Nightwolf, first truthful thing he said, this show is not important. Oh, ouch. Yes, he did say that. Let's see. Why on Patreon that lady threatening signature collection is so ridiculous. She's behaving in such a hateful way and preaching about compassion and inclusion. She is the hateful, exclusive, and non-compassionate. That's always how it is. Oh, the party of love and tolerance strikes again, you know. One more here. Robert Parker. WA congressional reps Randall, Strickland, and Jayapal all voted no on the House resolution to honor Charlie Kirk. And I saw this leftist social media personality who said, you know what Democrats should do? They should introduce a resolution to honor the Minnesota lawmaker who was killed, and watch what Republicans do. To which she was promptly told Democrats and Republicans introduced a joint resolution to honor Melissa Horman, and 100% of them voted for it. Already happened. We know who the morally consistent side is.
Right.
All right. We'll get to our sanity check. Our friend Jonathan Choe prohibited from a taxpayer-funded affordable housing complex. The Choe video is always good. First, did you know that September is one of the best months of the year to sell your home? And there's always this post-Labor Day sort of uptick and surge that can even last through October. That's according to our friend Wes Jones with sellwithwes.com. And so he really encourages you to find out right now how much your home might be worth. And you could go to one of these national sites and plug it in, but you want a local expert, local analysis. So go to sellwithwes.com. If you plug in your home address, you can get an estimate of how much your home is worth. And now is a really good time of the year to do that. And then you reach out to Wes and go through next steps. So that could include a free market analysis. So just sort of explaining to you, hey, based on your neighborhood, where you're at, comparables, recent home sales, here's what I think we have in store. Here's how much we can sell your home for, we think, and here's how long that might take. And then he's going to walk you through their listing boost concierge service, all the things he thinks that they need to do to the home, including cosmetic upgrades, to make sure you get the most possible money out of it, because that's what everyone wants when they go to sell their home. So go to sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. Again, start by using their free home value calculator, sellwithwes.com. It really just is a better way to sell your home. And with that, poor Jonathan Choe. Let's get to our closing sanity check. So this story gets crazier and crazier. So Jonathan Choe, of course, has been reporting on Plymouth housing and the fact that this is a taxpayer-funded affordable housing. They've got units all over the place. They're magnets for crime. They just become drug dens. People are overdosing and dying. The cops are at these locations all the time. One of the locations he's been at quite a bit is the Plymouth housing complex in Bellevue along I-90. And he did this huge expose 2 weeks ago about how Plymouth is just they're covering up the deaths, the overdoses, the crime element that's happening inside these buildings because they want to continue to get more taxpayer money. Well, for his efforts in telling the truth, Jonathan Choe has now been officially trespassed.
Absolutely insane. This is the type of stuff that Plymouth Housing, Plymouth Crossing, City of Bellevue, they don't want you to know about this type of stuff happening here every single day. The drain on resources, taxpayer dollars, the 911 calls.
We're acting private property. You're filming on private property right now.
Get away from me.
I'm not near you.
Don't even come near me. Okay, call the police. Oh, they're here. How many drug overdoses have been here?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm not on it. Okay. I'm not part of it.
Yeah.
But you're trespassed.
Don't come near me.
I'm not coming near you.
Good. Don't come near me, bro.
I'm walking on my residence.
You can.
What is this
if you touch me
and affect my life? You are filming me on private property without my permission.
There go the cops.
Which is against the law.
How are you, brother?
In the state. Do you have a lighter I can borrow?
Hey, Jonathan.
Yeah.
I'll press charges.
Good to see you.
I'll press charges.
Are they telling me to get out?
So they are telling you to leave. You are being trespassed from this property, man.
Okay. Now I'll leave because I got you're telling me to.
Just so you know, if you come back, you will be arrested, okay?
Fair enough.
Oh my God. A journalist exposing the truth of what's happening in a taxpayer-funded housing facility gets the cops called on him and gets trespassed. If he goes back, he'll be arrested. And what was he there doing that night? Documenting yet another instance of horror in these taxpayer-funded whorehouses. Not horror. Horror. Well, they might be whorehouses too. You know, there's a lot going on there. That has been our closing sanity check. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for supporting our show. A special thank you to Undivided subscribers who help make the show possible. If you want to sign up to become a subscriber, go to undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com, and just click on the banner that says support the show. It'll take you to our Patreon page and you can sign up there. I think that's it. We'll see you back here on the live show. Is it already Thursday tomorrow? Wow, how sad. Back here on the live show tomorrow at noon. Poor Jonathan. Justice for Jonathan. Happy birthday, Matt Gilbert. Sorry for that rendition of happy birthday. I'll make it up to next year.